Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm your host, KiKi L'Italien, and have you ever wondered why some communities feel magnetic? They feel like magic. It's where people show up and they actually invest in each other and stay, and others don't. In a world where so many of us feel like we're disconnected, despite being constantly connected on our phones and every other way that you can imagine possible, what really creates the glue that brings us all together? Charles Vogl is an acclaimed author. He is a keynote speaker. He's an advisor to global leaders, and he is possibly, and if you see that I'm getting like super excited as I'm talking to you, it's just because of what I'm about to tell you, which is he might possibly be best known for this book. There's a new version of it out called The Art of Community. And if you love community and bringing people together, and I know a lot of the audience here in Association Chat does, then you probably have read this, you're aware of it, you've wanted to read it, something like that. His work draws from more than 3,000 years of spiritual traditions and applies that wisdom, to today's most pressing leadership challenges. And we have some challenges, don't we? So he is amazing. I feel very lucky that he's here to join us today. And here we have Charles Vogl. Charles, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's always exciting to talk to someone excited to talk to me.
I mean, I have to say, I admire so much the principles that you write about in The Art of Community. I was super excited to see that there's this new edition out, and to have the chance to talk to you about that new edition, what's changed. There's like 25% new content. What is it? I want to get into all of that here with you today, and to talk even more about what you think, what you see about the way that people connect today that may be sort of, experiencing some challenges based on what's going on in our society. So to get started and to give people a little bit of context about you, I thought that we might go into talking a little bit about your own personal story, because I know that it's not necessarily a traditional path to begin looking at spiritual traditions and then working on community and teaching community to others. And so let's get into that. How did you get here?
Well, the quick version for the purpose of this conversation is, let's go back when I finished undergraduate school and I had a degree and I wanted to make a difference in the world, but I didn't know how to do that. And of course, the world says, go get a job. And that didn't sound really exciting. One of the adventures I had is I volunteered full time in a radical homeless shelter in Southern California. It's called the Catholic Worker. And one of the things that made the Catholic Worker radical is that we who were volunteering would actually invite in people who were homeless into the house, because that was a safe place to stay, consistent with Christian teaching. And in that place, the reality of dealing with homelessness in America is there's addiction, mental health issues, and then, of course, medical challenges that can be really disturbing. And none of us could do that except we work together. But no person could minister to all these sometimes dangerous challenges if you do it by yourself. And that really sat with me, that the only reason any of us can do this is we're doing it together. Subsequent to that, I served in the U.S. Peace Corps in northern Zambia, and I was there during the famous AIDS epidemic. And there, I was really struck when living in a village of 150 families where 1/3 of the year was called the hunger season. But if you lived in the village, you would always be taken care of. And that's because nobody would let somebody go hungry if they had food. And
Wow.
so was introduced to a world so different than where I was living in California, where everybody knew my name and everybody was looking out for me. And there are dark sides and bright sides to that, but nonetheless, it was a startling, change for me to go into culture. Came back to the United States, started making a film that would go on to become a PBS film about genocide survivors. And when I started, I literally didn't know how to turn on a camera. Certainly didn't have a rich uncle to pay for the film. So I just had to start fundraising. And I had mentors teach me how I had to bring people together who shared values and purpose to create a project much bigger than me. And it was in that process that someone explained to me that I had been using a Superman strategy of trying to do everything well. And that had what caused the burnout and the cynicism that I had been developed. And they taught me that if I wanted to be good at what I was doing and have international impact, what I needed to be good at was inviting people together around shared values and purpose to work together. Well, subsequent to that, I went to graduate school to study religion, philosophy, and ethics. And while I was there, I remember being stunned sitting in class, learning about spiritual traditions that have been so successful bringing people together around shared values and purpose for 1,000 years that I was aware that I could stand up from that classroom, literally go outside and go find people in the world continuing to gather around those traditions. And I thought that was deeply inspiring. So here I was, I finished that degree, and I didn't want to be a PBS genocide filmmaker anymore. I wasn't going to go back to Sub-Saharan Africa and work on human rights issues. And I certainly didn't want to get ordained. So I followed my wife to California and started just talking to people to find out who's doing what and how I could contribute to the economy, right? One of those lunches I had was a guy named Kevin Lynn. Kevin had recently started a company that's now called Twitch. And back then he shared that they only had 50 million members at the time. And Kevin explained how what he really wanted to do better was knit together the people who were showing up on the Twitch platform. He didn't say this because he thought I would solve it. He didn't say this because he knew that I had better wisdom. He was just talking about challenges he was facing. Well, in that moment at that lunch, my head almost exploded with all the ideas I wanted to share with Kevin. And so I went home to write what I thought was going to be a 10-page paper, put it on the internet, offer it to Kevin to build his global tech company. And it turned out I had so much more to say, because that's when I discovered that I had spent 15 to 20 years before that lunch practicing, learning, being coached by mentors, and of course, looking at traditions that were successful in knitting together relationships over shared values and purpose, even through sometimes existentially threatening times. So I kept writing. I was surprised when it was book length. I was surprised when the first publisher wanted to publish it. I was surprised when it was published, it won an award. And quite frankly, I'm surprised now that it's gone around the world and we're talking about the second edition coming out. So it's a
Yeah.
fantastic ride.
I can't believe it. And actually thinking about the Twitch story, like moving from Twitch and thinking about associations and thinking about, you know, when you're looking at bringing how groups have come together and why they've come together for so long. And then of course, you're thinking about what in the United States for sure. I know it's worldwide, but in the United States for sure right now, there's been this ongoing situation where we're feeling increasingly divided, even though we have a million different ways to get together. It's kind of wild to think that there could be people who are connecting better through community on Twitch than through their communities in associations or something like that. And so I find it fascinating to be at this point where you have so much insight into how to bring people together and what really seems to work. And the fact that we still are so divided, it must be incredibly frustrating for you on an ongoing basis because you're like, I have some answers, guys. I have some things that could help. Do you ever get frustrated with this?
The frustration is not the word that I use. There's definitely a longing.
Yeah.
My work is based on very long-standing, time-tested ideas and principles. And so I think of my work as simply distilling them and sharing wisdom that we've all known for untold generations. And I think that's one of the reasons why KiKi the book landed for you is when you read what I wrote, presumably everything you came across, you thought, of course that's true.
Yeah.
Of course, my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents have been using all these ideas in that book, and we've just forgotten them. We're just not using them. And so there's a longing for me to go out and shout, could we please put down the distractions, these new, obviously failing notions of what people need to do or want to do when they come together, and just go back to what we were doing in the 1500s and the 1300s and the 1200s. Not everything, obviously, but these principles, and knit together those relationships that have been serving our families for millennia.
Well, let's talk about one of those principles, because you do talk about these. I have my list of questions, and then you have to understand that
Let's go. Let's
can't
answer the good
help
questions.
I can't help myself from like jumping in with some other ones. But your work draws on these traditions that are thousands of years old. What's one principle that has stood the test of time and that still applies today?
What's one of them?
Just one. Just pull one of them.
Well, let's start with the first one that I write about, because we're talking to association leaders, and that is you need to have a clear boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I found that is counterintuitive for our time, that there's this mistaken idea in our time that if we're going to bring people together in our neighborhood, in our sport, in our profession, that everybody should be invited to everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from a very generous place, this idea that, well, if you're not inviting people, you must be a snob, you must be an elitist, you must be a terrible person if you can name people who shouldn't be at that particular event at that time.
Yes.
There's a problem with that. And that is, if you don't know who you're working and investing in to knit together into relationships that are supportive and making them more resilient, then you don't know who to invest in if you don't have a boundary. Because anybody could come in and you're like, well, who are we investing in? We don't even know what the boundary is. And then the other thing that happens is you can never have an intimate experience or a more mature experience. I don't know as much about association management and development as you do. Here's what I do know. If Charles, who doesn't have the experience, shows up to an event that you intend for people with a minimum of 20 years of experience and international experience and cross-cultural experience, and I show up and I have as much freedom to ask the questions I want to ask as everybody else, I'm going to hijack that event. That event is not going to be a high-end event for people at the cutting edge of bringing international cultures together in very sophisticated events. Because you let me in. That doesn't mean that you don't like me. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean in 15 to 20 years, I won't be qualified to be in that room. But you know what, Charles? This room isn't for you now. So the way we make sure that we're not snobs is we make sure we have different kinds of events. Some events are what we call outer ring events, where visitors can come, family members can come, former roommates can come and see that we're friendly people and we like to meet people. But then we have inner ring events where we can talk about the cutting edge challenges or growth areas or weaknesses that we want to address with people who understand us.
I love this example because I just recently had the good fortune to interview a wonderful group of women who have formed a community. It's called the Association Women in Technology Champions, AWTC. And they've grown and grown and grown and grown and become an official nonprofit and all of these things. But I was interviewing the founders about this and asking them, when something grows so large and you run into problems, you run into issues because inevitably there are different ideas about how it should grow, who you should serve. And this was one of the very specific things we talked about, which there was concern about making sure that everyone in the community felt welcome. And I mean, the larger community of associations, right? Association world. But how do you serve for very specifically women in technology and make sure that that core group that wanted to get together and talk about those specific issues could talk about them? And so they did. They created these different types of events in order to have allies and supporters and have everyone have a good time, but still serve that primary audience and that primary core membership so that they felt like they were still being seen and heard and their needs met. I see here, and this is one of the benefits of doing these live streams. People ask, why do you do this? And you do it live and you don't just, record it and release it later. And this is exactly why. And Lauren Lemunyon, I love Lauren. She's out here and she asks on LinkedIn, it's so amazing. She actually says, it's so amazing how much experience we have buried, but don't give it credit until we have these serendipitous conversations. So true. Absolutely. It's really amazing that we can have so many different things that are going on out there, and so much experience. And then it just doesn't get that credit until we have a chance to exchange with other people. So excellent comment. I'm so glad that you're out there. Yeah, it's wild, because I think that when we're thinking about something like this book, I would have said that this book's pretty comprehensive. And for those who are listening later, I'm holding up The Art of Community: 7 Principles for Belonging that Charles wrote. Listen, the second edition came out, it has 25% new content. What was there to add? Why did it need more content? Why did it need this second edition to be released?
Well, so the first book came out in 2016, and it's hard to remember then, but back when I released that book, and my publisher took a wild risk releasing a book on community by a guy with a degree in religion. When I said that I was writing a book on community, because it was not in the zeitgeist as it is now, there was assumption that I must be writing about people on a beach singing Kumbaya. And little did we know that in a few years, the Surgeon General would look at the data on our separation, isolation in America alone and declare a loneliness epidemic. And of course, we certainly didn't know that the pandemic would come and separate us and isolate us in ways that were unprecedented in a generation. So a lot has changed since the book came out in 2016. And it was important that for new readers who found it after you, KiKi, that the book acknowledge the world has changed and speak to that. So that's partly what happened. And then I've now traveled around the world talking about this. And I think, the book is used by many of the most admired organizations in the world, including Google and LinkedIn and the US Army. And so in the course of all those conversations, I learned some ideas that were going to be helpful to add to the body of work I shared to help transition learning ideas that are very, very old and making them immediately applicable. I'll give you one idea, KiKi. In the new edition, I talk explicitly about what I coined the campfire experience. And this is the idea that the relationships that we form that support us and make us resilient in the most challenging times are formed in small, intimate experiences. And KiKi, if you think of the top 5 people you would call tonight, if someone in your family got a bad diagnosis or there's an emergency in your household, my guess is of those 5 relationships, all of them were formed in a series of small, intimate experiences. All of them.
Yeah.
And yet we live in a culture where when I go to events and organizations invite me to participate, where their idea of connecting people are big events in big rooms full of people, often with loud music. And because somebody who's producing it is scared to death that we're going to become bored, they put entertainment everywhere, which often includes screens or performance.
Loud music. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm not against big rooms. I'm not against big crowds. Hey, I think performers are wonderful. But if what you want to do, KiKi, is help me create relationships that are going to help me in my career, in my parenting, in my spiritual growth, in my athletic life, and you want to help me have people in my life I can call on the challenging days, maybe the scary days, guess what kind of room you need to not put me in?
I know. Right. It's so true. Yeah. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. So when we start distinguishing what we call campfire experiences, and I just simply call that because people have been sitting around campfires and intimate experiences for generations. Now we give producers permission to create the small, intimate experiences. Or if we have a big event, notice where in that experience are we making it possible through furniture, through sound, by invitation, through programming to encourage these small experiences. When I say small, KiKi, I mean small. In the book, I have a diagram called the Brooks Lines of Communication, and anybody listening can look that up on the internet, that shows as soon as we add a 6th person to a group of people talking, we increase the number of communication lines by fully 50%.
Wow.
And as someone who's not trained and hasn't looked at those graphs, they're like, well, it's 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people. That's a small group. No. That 6th person increases the number of lines by 50%. We're burdening our participants with that. Well, I talked to organizations with 6 digits of employees, and their idea of a small group is 15. I can't. KiKi, you've never sat at a table of 10 at a conference, at a fundraiser, or a wedding for hours, 2, 3 hours. You've never
Mhm.
stood up at the end of that meal and thought, wow, what deep and interesting and vulnerable conversations we had. I can't wait to talk to them again. Am I right?
Right.
It's
Right.
too
That's
big.
true.
You can't
That's
handle
true.
it.
That's
So
true.
how,
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, I've had it where two of us had sort of sectioned off, but it was like, it never happens at the whole
that's right.
table. It's like
And when
that.
you're
Yeah.
sectioning yourself off, you're like defending yourself from all the
Yeah.
distractions. So
Yes.
what if everybody listening here who brings people together in associations recognizes, oh, my participants are hungry for these intimate, quiet experiences, and I can invest in that and offer to them, and they're actually going to find what they're seeking, those extemporaneous conversations that lead to something rich and powerful.
You so get it. You so get it. It's so clear because, and I already had like, there are people who are commenting over here. I'm going to bring up one of those comments in just a second. But you so get it. It's clear because I'm telling you, if you work in associations, you attend endless amounts of these meetings where you end up at those tables. And you're absolutely right. Someone thinks that you're at a round and it's a round of 8. And hey, you've got room. You've got like this is great. It's the perfect opportunity to build those connections. And you're saying not necessarily let's look at what how this really works and be mindful of that. Valerie, she is, hi, Valerie. She's out here on LinkedIn and she says, if you have inner and outer rings, is it important to have paths into the inner rings? Are the rings a hierarchy or just a way to organize around different needs and interests? How much of the purpose is about progressing, we can say progressing through the rings versus meeting everyone where they are? So yeah, that's a really great question. Valerie's
Oh
wanting to get
man.
into the details. She wants
Right.
some
Well, Valerie, you were asking all the right questions. And just to give you confidence, that's actually a whole chapter in the book. And
yeah,
so I have taken time to address that. Not
yep,
only is it important that there's a path to get into the rings, it's
rings.
important that we have people called elders that help people cross through those ring boundaries. And
Mm-hmm.
we call them gatekeepers.
Mm.
Everyone listening, I'm guessing, has been to a spiritual organization or a professional organization or a sport organization. You showed up to find out, do I like it? Do I fit here? Look, I'm into biking, but I'm not into like hardcore biking, or I'm only into hardcore biking, or can you learn to bike in this? Like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And like, we just don't know how you get in and we don't know who's doing what and if I fit, right? I've talked to so many religious organizations, churches that wring their hands because young families aren't joining.
Uh-huh.
And first questions I ask, well, if you're a young family and you show up, who's the person who knows they're going to help them get connected? They're going to cross the boundary from visitor to, we would say, novice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if your organization doesn't know who those people are, we don't know who visitors need to meet to find out this is what the schedule looks like, and this is how you should be prepared if you're going to bike with us or put your kids in Sunday school. Then how do you think the visitors know?
Right.
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 And the rings are not there to just keep people out because you're a snob. The rings are kept as a boundary on shared value and purpose. If Charles isn't interested in creating conferences of over 500 people internationally and building 20 years of experience, then you shouldn't be at this event, Charles. It's not because you're a bad person, but you're not committing decades of your life and you're not planning to create events of over 500 people.
Right.
And if you are, then we can talk about if there's a ring for you. So there are both segments and then there are inner rings. So we'll just pick a biking group because it's easy. Most people have seen a bike.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a mountain bike group. There may be a road racing group. There may be a beach cruising bike group
I
for
was going to
families.
say beach cruiser.
That's right.
I'm dealing with the shore over here in New Jersey. So
Yeah, and if what I need to worry about is having enough wet wipes for my kids when our family goes on a beach cruise, maybe I shouldn't be in the mountain biking group that's talking about a multi-day trek across the Rocky Mountains.
Yes.
Doesn't mean I'm bad. Doesn't mean they're better than me. It's like you're worried about wet wipes and bathroom stops, and we're talking about how do we get gear that's going to keep us alive in an accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a segmenting. And then inner rings are not there to just let people lord over how they like each other. Inner rings are a representation of maturation. So let's say I want to do mountain biking in the Rockies. Well, maybe I should learn just the basic safety navigation. And then once I'm up for that, then maybe I'm okay for a full day ride with groups who are more experienced. And then after that, maybe we can talk about multi-day. And then after that, maybe we can talk about winter, right? But Charles, if you don't know how to keep yourself safe and what safety equipment you need, then we're not going to take you on a winter multi-day biking trip. Now, the people who run these inner rings, we call them elders, right? They have more wisdom and knowledge, and they share the values of, in this case, outdoor adventure. They're not there to congratulate themselves with their inner rings. As we mature in an inner ring progression, we expand our concern for others. So when I show up to learn mountain biking, I want to learn to mountain bike. I want to have a good time. I want to stay safe. If I'm running the Berkeley Mountain Group Club, I better be concerned, is everybody joining me safe? Are they not getting lost? Do they have the right equipment? Do they know where we're going to meet? And then if I'm going to be teaching multi-day mountain biking adventures, I better be concerned about everybody in the trail, everybody who's on the mountain and may need safety equipment. So as I mature in the inner rings, my concern for people expands, and now I'm contributing. I'm teaching people, how do you bandage wounds in the mountains? I teach them, how do you make sure that you get to safety if you get lost? So yes, segments and inner rings, and they reflect a pattern of maturation. And if we want people to join inner rings and make them more fun, then we need to make sure that some of our elders understand their gatekeepers to invite people on the inside.
It's so good. It's so good. I love this. And I bet Valerie's out there saying, yes, yes, yes. I really, honestly, excellent stuff. And it does make you think a little bit more strategically about, like, how are we cultivating these really important relationships so that people know how do you know if you're an elder, and like how you can help in the best possible way. I love that we have language for this. I love that we have a way to discuss this. Lauren asks a really great question. She's curious about what you think, Charles, about Mark Zuckerberg's assertion that we'll have more AI friends than human ones. That's a really good question.
I don't see anything good coming out of that.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I will sound like a Luddite in the next generation. I don't really care how many people are connected to me online that have a moniker that says like or a thumbs up. Here's what I care about, Lauren. When my wife gets sick and I'm going to struggle taking care of my son, maybe even keeping the house, maybe getting out of bed, I'm going to care about who's going to show up. And maybe just as importantly, I care that there are people that when that time comes for them, they can call me and I get to show up.
Right.
And I don't think any of us in those moments are going to care what our social media numbers say. And I think we're really not going to care how many of those social media numbers are not real people.
Yeah. You brought up earlier, you said when something like a traumatic thing happens, who you're going to call is probably a handful of people. And those people you've probably had those campfire experiences with before. And, this past year, I really went through that. I lost my mom, and when I ended up going back, I'm originally from Missouri. When my sister and I went back, I had posted that we were going to have this memorial service for our mother. And the people who showed up, Charles, campfire experiences, absolutely. My very first best friend in the entire world came walking down. I didn't know she would be there. Came walking down. I'm going to cry. This little dusty and this old cemetery. I see my friend Lisa walking down. I saw my friend from junior high that I was in a singing choir with, and we did all of these performances and competitive stuff together. And it was actually, I saw that in motion, and that's who shows up. It's those people that you create those experiences with. So it's very powerful. And I promise you that no matter how well my instance of Chat GPT knows me, my natal chart, and my all of the other stuff that goes along with that, it would not be walking down the road towards me when I needed someone to give me a hug at a graveside. So really, really powerful stuff. Woo, I took us down a deep path. Let's talk about.
Well, you're doing that because this is how important this subject is.
Yeah, it
And
is.
you're helping everybody listening be reminded of how these ideas literally change lives. And some might even say make life worth living.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about rituals because I think an interesting thing about your work, and you go into this and the role that it plays, particularly in community building. But I think that that's something that we don't see as much of when you're thinking about um, professional settings, and when you're talking about building community, is that all associations want to do. They want people to feel like they're connected. They're getting value out of these important connections they have with other people. And yet, when you bring up the word ritual, I think there's a disconnect between what they think of as ritual and how it can be incorporated in an important way into community building. So can you speak to that point?
Yeah, well, in the book, I believe I define a ritual as the things that we do that have meaning. Mm-hmm. That can be a very, very brief action, putting a name on a wall, or it can involve activities for days. Mm-hmm. And because they have meaning and we don't do them for practical reasons, usually rituals are both impractical and inefficient. Mm-hmm. If you think about all the people, KiKi, you've seen walking down an aisle to get married, my hope is they walked really slowly. And the reason they walked really slowly is because it was impractical and inefficient, and it might have been one of the most powerful moments in some of those family members' lives. So when we talk about ritual, we're talking about doing things that may be impractical and inefficient, but they have a lot of meaning for the people who are doing them. And we're living in a culture where many Americans are largely leaving their home faith traditions. And so one of the things that comes out of that is we're leaving the traditions that give us the rituals that acknowledge and honor how we are changing, or a different way of saying the same thing, that acknowledge and honor our maturation. And so we have 2 generations now of people who have lost rituals that were taken for granted, where people in our lives, people who know us, say in action, we see that you're different now. We see you're a more mature person. And there's a longing for that. And associations have a fantastic opportunity to acknowledge how people are progressing in their field, or adapting into a world full of uncertainty and enduring it. I mean, everybody who had a business where they had to bring people together and live through the pandemic may have demonstrated more resilient than anybody in the field in a generation, if you're still standing. Wow. Is that worth honoring? Is that worth taking 10 to 30 minutes to honor? I'll give you an example how simple this can be, KiKi. My wife and I host a lot of dinners in our home because we like to eat dinner, right? It's not rocket science. Guess what? Our friends come. You know how they become our friends? They eat dinner with us. And we have a tradition in my house that when the dessert comes out, I have long candles and I put it in whatever is dessert that night. And by that point in the evening, I know how something has changed for someone's life. I learned that one of my friends was elected the president of his professional association, for example. And one night we had a 12-year-old and she had given a recent recital. So before we start dessert, we just take a moment and say, we're going to take a moment to acknowledge and honor how we're changing and maturing. And I put that candle and I light it, and I could turn to that 12-year-old and said, you just shared that you performed a recital of new music. It's the first time you've played that music. It's the first time you've played in front of a room of that many people listening. Please, before we have dessert, share what is you hope to accomplish as an artist now that you're at this chapter and this level of your work. Well, she had an answer. But KiKi, you already know how many times that year a table of adults stopped their conversation, gave a 12-year-old their attention, and listen to her share about how she's developing as an artist. Right.
Yeah, like none. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she got as much time as she wanted, and she took less than half an hour, obviously. But my point is, so simple, so inexpensive, so meaningful. Do you think there was a single adult at that table who said, man, I don't want to hear a 12-year-old talk about how she's maturing as an artist. This is the dumbest dinner I've ever been to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hell no.
Yeah.
Now, it can
Yeah.
get much more involved than that when we want to create rituals, but you can see how in a matter of minutes, at the cost of a candle, we can give a powerful moment to somebody who's longing for others to recognize we're changing.
I think everybody here, probably everyone listening, wants to get invited to your house, Charles. We want to go to dinner at your house. I want to see those candles.
Well,
No,
here's the thing, KiKi.
thank you.
I do get flown in, and I create powerful dinner experiences, among other experiences,
Oh,
where we can
wow.
use the principles that you've read in the book, and we can experience them in real time. And I'll tell you, I did this in Portland, and it was a table of, quite frankly, thought leaders, all authors.
Yeah.
And I was shocked when, during the evening, people started to cry.
Amazing.
And they were crying because they were moved like you were moved in this conversation, just recognizing who makes a difference and how it makes a difference. And the reason I was surprised was not that people are moved to tears when they start becoming present to relationships in their lives, right? But because I was outside of my place, they didn't know me, they didn't know what the program was going to be. There's no prompt there to encourage people to go really deep and vulnerable, because nobody wants to go to that dinner. I don't go to that dinner if you're going to dig into me. But just experiencing a time where we take a moment and reflect in ways that we all long to, even if it hasn't been said, brings up a lot of meaning and emotion.
Well, this is a great segue, by the way, for me to actually talk about the fact that I truly appreciate that you can talk about those meaningful experiences around your own dinner table, but then you also understand how to work with all kinds of different groups. And I just wanted to tell everyone, please go visit his website. And I'm going to, if you're watching right now, or if you're watching this as on video later, for those who are listening to it, we'll have it in the show notes. I'm putting your website, charlesvogl.com, at the bottom of the screen. It'll be in the show notes, but I'm also going to add, there is a wonderful resource that you can access to go along with the learnings, to go along with the lessons that Charles talks about. I have to boost this, Charles, because I love that you have this. It's an amazing resource, beautiful PDF, The Power of Togetherness, Essential Guidelines for Connection Events for Nonprofit and Association Leaders. And I say this because, there can be amazing people that know a lot about bringing people together, a lot about a lot of things, but oftentimes they may not be familiar with the ways that associations and nonprofits work, and the types of ways that we need to think about how we're bringing people together. And I just want to, highlight for everyone, here you have this great resource. It's available. People can go download it for free off of your website, find out more about you, connect with your resources, your other resources there, your other books there. I didn't even know you did these hosted dinners, so that's really cool. And I just am very thankful that you provide something like this, because this is, 30 pages. It's not nothing. There's a lot. This is good stuff that's in here. And this is just something you offer for free. This handout for people to check out on your website, and I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I was inspired by traveling around the world now to conferences as a speaker, and just seeing how many organizations had spent 6 digits on events.
Yeah.
And they said that they were for connecting people, and then they obviously didn't use very, very basic ideas that we've referenced, some of them here. And I thought, gee, I don't know who was spending this money and organizing this. If they just had a simple tool, a guideline to at least inform them of practices to help net people together, then maybe they'd make choices differently. And by making it a free as a gift, I'm hoping it'll be emailed around and nobody needs to contact me. And when we go to these events, the people showing up will find them richer and more fun, and quite frankly, even less expensive, because it turns out for you and me to build friendship, KiKi, all we really want is like tea and muffins and a quiet,
That's
soft
true.
place to sit. If it has a good view, great. But you know what? We've made friends without a good view.
Yeah.
And we don't need the huge room with the big pictures every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're so right. And it is kind of amazing. Sometimes I'll joke with people if I've been in the situation where I've gotten stuck in the elevator and it's just long and it hasn't happened, knocking on wood, it hasn't happened for a while. But it's been just long enough where I kind of jokingly say, well, now we're on each other's Christmas cards list, as we're leaving. And I just think it's interesting how shared experience and not necessarily a campfire moment in that example, but the shared experience can actually create something that is sort of special where people think, yeah, I'm never going to forget this conversation. I'm never going to forget this person. Even if you don't make it to their Christmas card list, you can have these meaningful exchanges that help to bring more meaning into our existence and being human. I do want to, maybe talk to that point a little bit more too, because this situation of looking at the way that we interact with technology is such an ongoing challenge. It is something that it's increasingly distracting, even though we all seem to be becoming more aware of it now. And it does pull at, I think, not just people's ability to concentrate and connect with others, but it also pulls at our social practices, the things that are okay to do in public, the things that are okay to do when you're engaged in a conversation with someone else. I'll give you an example. I had a first meeting with somebody who it was, I'd never met them before. We were likely going to be doing a lot more work together. And it was a video meeting, like most of our meetings are these days. And that person was distracted and was typing and doing stuff on another computer, another screen next to them. And I don't have any idea what was going on in this person's life. I don't know if they were even aware of what this felt like. But to me, it felt like, wow, they don't care. It's disrespectful. They have zero interest in anything that I'm going to say. And I started building this sort of barrier between us, that, I had to work very consciously to not discount or try to get back at, in some way, be rude back and look like I'm not interested, in our follow-up conversations. That's a really long-winded way to give an example of saying, what do you suggest to people who, when they're coming into meetings or there's this whole purpose of trying to bring people together, but we all know that these devices and our technology is getting in the way? Do you have some suggestions for people on ways that they can sort of counteract that or put
Yeah,
things more into balance?
absolutely. So based on the research, which is really clear, electronic devices erode the experience of our time together. And I don't just mean phubbing, which is the research term for what you describe, where someone snubs you out for their phone
Mhm.
or a technical device. It turns out simply having a device in view meaningfully erodes our experience together.
Wow.
And I'd like to tell this anecdote when I'm training people. Whenever I speak, there's a point early on where I invite everybody in the room, no matter how big the room, to turn off their phones and put them away where nobody can see them. And it's based because of the research. And at some point when someone's scheduling me to come in, someone on my team is going to tell them Charles is going to do this. And the response is so predictable, we have a name for it. We call it the freak out, where they're going to freak out because they don't want Charles to tell thousands of people to put away their phone.
Oh,
Right.
right.
And very often they come back with even better idea. And their better idea is to have everybody in this conference hall put their phones in the center of the table that they're sitting at. That's their better idea. So, KiKi, you know that I have a degree in religion. What I'm going to tell you, you probably don't need a degree in religion to understand.
Mhm.
If you go into a space, KiKi, that you've never been in before, do you know the relative importance of the things that are put in the center, lifted up, and lit?
No.
How important are things in our lives that we put in the center, lift up, and lit in the spaces we're in?
Wow. Pretty important.
Pretty important. If I go to your house, things that are in
Yeah.
the center,
Yeah.
lifted up, and lit. So I
Yes.
want you to note that when I go to create a time and a space and experience of connection, the people who are inviting me in want me to invite everyone to put their cell phones in the middle of the table, above the floor, where
Like
they're
that's
lit.
the most important, right? No.
And they don't even recognize that they're falling in a pattern of thousands of years of where we put honorific things.
Wow. Wow.
And all of us who study spiritual spaces, religious
Yeah.
tradition, and liturgy see exactly what's going on. It's one hair away from worshiping the phone.
That
To put it
is
in the most
so
honor, right?
wild.
Right,
That
exactly
is
right.
so
And
wild.
they offer this as a better idea to my idea when they want me to come in the room and create an experience of deep connection for their members. So the reason I mention this is to show you how bad the infection, if you will, of this distraction and erosion and it happened to you and you weren't even in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my answer is create an option where we invite everybody to put their phone in a device. My device is called a phone basket.
Mhm.
And don't say, hey, put in your phone basket because you're a jerk if you're not.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Or this is what we do. And if you don't do it, you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
What I say is I'm inviting you to join me in putting your phone here because we're together going to vote with our hands to be with the people in the room instead of the people outside the room.
Making a commitment to the
And
moment.
then
I love it.
we ritually walk the phones out of the room. Now, we don't
Wow.
walk it far away. And
Yes.
inevitably, if it's a big enough room and people don't know this is coming, somebody's like, oh, but I have to be in contact. I have to be in contact. I totally have to be in contact. Now, in the 10 years or so we've been doing this, the number of times an emergency came up and somebody had to be in contact is, I think, exactly 0. But nonetheless, in their head, it's real.
Mhm.
So we have a way of handling that. And we say, I tell you what, if you want to participate and everybody's doing it, we're walking the phone to the room, you can give your phone to the host and you can give whatever instructions you need to give. If it
Mhm.
rings, you got to hand it to me, or I got to check it at 6 p.m. or every 15 minutes, I need to come over and see if there's whatever it is. And you know what happens is it turns out, just like it was in 1990, people can actually have a shared time together without getting called out of the room.
Right.
When we
Right.
do this, I've noticed there's often a huge sigh of relief that we are collectively desperate for a time to come together where there aren't 30 devices in the room
Mhm.
with dozens of programs designed to get our attention when we say what we want to do is spend this time together. But
Yeah.
the host needs to create the rules and do it with meaning, right? Not arbitrary. We invite everyone to vote with their hands to be with those of us who are in the room instead of out the room.
Yeah. Yeah. I do love the idea of, I think it's interesting. I have a 17-year-old daughter. There's a lot interesting about that. I have a 17-year-old daughter who she and her friends, while they enjoy like taking pictures and stuff together, increasingly there are times when they all want to abandon their phones, and like it's novel for them. It's novel for them to just go on a hike and like leave their phones and stuff
Mhm.
behind, which I find fascinating. This is how I grew up. Is not, of course, we didn't even have this, but
Mhm.
like for them, it's like they're making this choice, and also buying like cameras, actual cameras that are separate from their phones, so they don't have to have their phones. And I think it's just fascinating that while we have created this amazing device that can do all of the things, they're like, no, we kind of want to just put this down and have some time away from it. And I think that's extremely healthy. I do have a question that is relevant to what we were just talking about campfire experiences. Valerie, who wants to get it, she wants to get her knowledge on. I love that she's taking advantage of this. How do campfire experiences scale up to more connectedness and a bigger association, or even full society or country? Are the campfires the building blocks, or are these separate concerns?
All right, so the different kinds of events, they're so-called arena events. And by the way, I write all about this in my book, Building Brand Communities.
Mhm.
And that book is for any organization that has an identity that's bringing people together. So associations are definitely branded communities, right? So just know I go really deep into that. And different kinds of events are arena events, which is to say we're all facing someone in the front, we're all in a big room, and then more intimate events, campfire experiences, and you can combine them. So you can have an event where there's an arena experience for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then you break it up into more campfire experiences. And quite frankly, you've seen a lot of that in many places, right? And actually, that's the best case scenario. Another thing to do is just make sure that you're scaling a lot of campfire experiences, and you can do that in one spot. So you can have a beach barbecue, but you can set it up instead of these big circles of chairs or all the chairs around one campfire. Just because you're trained and you understand how this works, make sure you set up your chairs in groups of 5 or less. And by the way, groups of 2 and 3 are fantastic. In fact, when
Mhm.
you think of those friends you'd call KiKi, a
Mhm.
lot of those conversations were groups 2 and 3, maybe
Mhm.
even in a car.
Right. That's
So
true.
so when we understand that, all of a sudden 2 and 3 becomes great.
Yeah.
3 is often better than 2 in programming, because if somebody has a family member that's in distress and distracted by it, it's really good to give their partner another option to talk to than someone who's, distracted by distress, for example.
Mhm.
So we set up our spaces with several campfires in it, and we think that ahead with furniture. By the way, if you invite me to your event, wittingly or unwittingly, and I get there and you tell me it's a connection event for all these professionals, and I get there and I only see arena setup, I immediately know
Right.
you have no idea how people connect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
all of this is just theater and
Right.
or an effort on your part to get a good picture for the report,
It's true.
and no or little effort to actually help people connect. So that's one way to do it, is you create those events. Another one way is just to make sure that your events are very lo-fi, and then create a way structure that your participants can create them themselves. So for example, um, I have advised a very, very famous media company you've heard of, KiKi.
Mhm.
And this is a multi-billion dollar building company. And anytime they have a program to create events to connect people, because they're a famous company that has a lot of money, whoever's assigned to do that needs to make it a really spectacular event. Well, this company is dealing with the same isolation, disconnection that the Surgeon General has written about the whole country. This company is not special. And what would really help them is soup and bread. If they had their staff that they want to connect better, just share soup and bread on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it would get way better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If not soup and bread, ice cream.
Mhm.
But they're just kind of unwilling to do that because it's not spectacular enough and there's no good pictures. So if you go lo-fi and understand soup and bread or ice
Soup
cream
and
is good,
bread or
right?
ice cream. Yes. Yes. It
And one
doesn't have
strategy I
to
use as
be.
a filmmaker is I would get gift certificates to a
Uh-huh.
famous ice cream shop you've heard of. And whenever we had to celebrate a failure or a success, I would pass out the, quite frankly, inexpensive ice cream cards and say, you need to take someone else on the team and go celebrate. Well,
Aw.
A, they have a celebration from the boss, right?
Yeah.
And B, they're going to spend time having a conversation, a private conversation about what they want to talk about, celebrating that they wouldn't have generated otherwise,
Mhm.
right? And you know what it costs? It costs 2 ice creams.
Wow. I love that so much, and it's really speaking to what's actually meaningful and effective, and not just theater, to your point, you know? I can't believe it, like, we're I can't believe I can only talk to you for an hour today.
Well, we can
Um,
talk another time unless you
we'll
know something
we'll
about my
have
future
to
that I don't know.
we have to set something up. I did want to ask you, because I know that you do a ton of these. You do so many interviews. You have been speaking about not just this book, but all of your books for a while now. And so you get asked the same questions all of the time. What's a question that you either never get asked, or you're so rarely at that you're like, why don't people ask me this?
Well, I know why they don't ask me this, and it's terribly, terribly important in our time. And then, as Charles, what's the importance of silence?
Ooh.
And KiKi, you were just sharing that you lost a family member, and it was really moving. And you already shared that the friends that you had, that you formed from a series of experiences in an intimate and quiet place, built relationships that were there for you when you needed and wanted them. And my guess is you're also that person for somebody else. I think I already know when you had those friends show up at a time where you needed them, you know exactly how much witty repartee you were looking for.
Yeah.
And my guess is what you really wanted were the people that you knew could handle and could be with long moments of silence. And we live in a culture, I'm contacted by hundreds of people who want to create better events, and they want to fill every moment with something entertaining. And I was just at a conference actually last week, and there was a invitation to this group of 30 to do a share activity, and there was a pause, and the pause didn't even make it 30 seconds. And one of the 30 said, "Hey, what's going on here? Why all the silence?" And I got to interrupt and say, silence isn't a problem. Silence is how we demonstrate to one another that we're available to listen and that we're patient. And I promise you, KiKi, if I'm invited to an association event by anybody listening, and I go there and I notice they understand that silence is listening, silence is patience, then I understand there's a sophistication level of bringing people together in powerful experiences they long for that are by far the 99th percentile.
Wow. That is good stuff, Charles. That's really good. I want to thank you so much for your time, joining us today, being willing to speak openly, answer questions that were coming in. You didn't know what was going to come in, and here we go. And just in general, for all of the great work that you've done. This book has meant a lot to me. Your work is really, really needed in this world. And I'm really thankful that you exist. And so thank you for taking the time to speak with me, to speak with the audience of Association Chat, and for the good work that you do. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to be invited.
Oh, wow, folks. What did you think? How do you feel? What are your takeaways? What are you getting from all of this? I hope that you got as much from this discussion as I did. I'm very thankful to Charles for all of his time. I have an entire list of questions that I never got to because got so caught up in just having the discussion. So I will be following up to try to schedule another one. But I am thankful for this time and this powerful conversation today. One question I wanted to ask is the measurement question. Everybody always wants to ask about measurement and metrics and how do you do things like measure trust and the bonds that are created. So remind me, everyone, to ask about that next time. But here are some key takeaways I had. Community isn't accidental. Community, if you really want to cultivate community, it helps to put some purpose into it, to be intentional about this and to think about those shared values and things like ritual, like how can you incorporate that to make an experience more meaningful for everyone and to provide that moment for listening and really processing for the people involved. And then also spiritual traditions. They offer these tools that are timeless, that have worked for so long in building trust and connection. So how can we use some of these things that we know work? How can we take things that Charles writes about in his book and apply them to what's happening today when we complain about feeling disconnected? The answers can be there for us. So I encourage everyone to go check out the second edition. I have it on Audible. I am ordering the hard copy. And if you want to keep the conversation going, as always, I encourage you to take part in the community online for Association Chat. Go to associationchat.com if you want to become an AC insider. We do have our private, not live stream, not recorded conversation that happens every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You're always welcome to join that. And we do have the next magazine issue that will be coming out soon. But until next time, everyone, this is KiKi L'Italien signing off and reminding you to keep asking questions, because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. Oh, talk to you next time.